Gibson Crest Proprietary Limited. I'd like to thank you for your open and honest talk. I have an observation that 2/3 of your operations are joint ventures. And it's well known that operating in a joint venture is much more complicated and difficult than a normal operation. Could you please give us an idea of what sort of strategy you use to operate in these joint ventures? What sorts of changes do you envisage? And how you might terminate some joint ventures that are not growing and are very old?
Okay.
Thank you.
Tony, thank you for the question. And look, it's an interesting topic around joint ventures when you think of some of the recent events around, for example, Samarco. Look, from our perspective, we do have a range of joint ventures, of which there's only one where we're not really in control. So if you have a look at our manganese joint venture with Anglo, we've had a very good relationship for a long period of time, but it's actually South 32 people who operate that business. It's our uniforms, it's our people, it's our systems, it's our processes, and we market 100% of the product. So I'm absolutely comfortable, A, with how it works, and B, our partner. Worsley's probably in a similar vein, as is Moselle, where we actually operate the day-to-day business. The area we probably don't operate, and the area we spend a bit of time focusing on over time, hopefully changing the dynamic, would be our aluminium/aluminum bauxite business in South America with Alumar. You know, we have a different joint venture structure for the mine, the refinery, and the smelter, which is temporarily closed, and that's one where we rely on other people to operate. The advantage we have some very good, well-established partners in those businesses, such as Alcoa in Rio and Vale. But again, it's probably the only one joint venture where we're not in control of the day-to-day activity, and we'd like to make sure over time we have in place the right structures and controls that we're absolutely comfortable. Yep, over.
Thank you. Graham, well done. This is Owen Hegarty here from EMR Capital, the new force in mining private equity.
Nice sales pitch. No.
So Graham, thank you very much for that. An outstanding speech here at the Melbourne Mining Club. Well done, and congratulations to you and your team on establishing South 32 away from the apron string, so to speak, of BHP. So that must have been quite a scary experience, and well done with respect to having that newly liberated culture in the company. So, and no doubt that was part of the reason for the strong performance. The question is more to do with where to next in terms of diversity or diversification, if you like, away from those existing commodities, and you've got quite a wide spread of commodities there, and away from those existing countries or continents, and you've got quite a wide spread of those two. Or would alternatively you consider some sales of some of those assets type of thing? Thank you, Graham.
Okay. Oh, and thank you, and a good challenging question with many parts. Look, the way I think about why we exist, it's quite simple: to create value for shareholders. And if you think about some of the fundamental thinking behind South 32 when we set it up, and if you look back at some of the decisions the industry's made over the last 10 years, it's been a very poor allocator of capital. So we started life with a couple of basic founding principles. One is that we do believe in having a strong balance sheet. The second piece we believe in is focusing on value over volume. So when we think about acquisitions, when we think about the current mix of the portfolio and what we do with it, it's always through the lens of value and creating value for our shareholders. If we look at our assets today, it is important to understand, you know, one of the, if you like, unhelpful probably names we got when we sort of demerged from BHP Billiton for a while was, there was Spinco, there was Crapco, there was Shitco, there was a variety of different names that came with us. But I think people often forget that when we looked at the assets within BHP Billiton, there was absolutely the core that they kept. Then there was the assets that came to South 32, and then there was a series of assets, if you like, that didn't come to South 32, such as New Mexico Coal and Nickel West. So we were quite focused on the assets we took to South 32. And if you think about our assets ourselves, we are absolutely diversified in terms of the different commodities we produce, the geographic location, and one of the surprises to many analysts is that we only sell 7% of our product in terms of revenue to China. So we're actually quite diversified by revenue stream as well. But I think if you look at our commodities, one of the advantage we had when we started to talk about our operations to investors was a lot of the investors didn't know our assets. They thought about them as short life. They thought about them as in terms of high costs. Yes, we have some challenges around grade decline at Cannington and also places like Cerro Matoso. But if you look at Illawarra, you look at Worsley, you look at Energy Coal South Africa, we've got decades and decades of resource. If you look at today, first half of last year, 80% of our revenue came from operations that are in the first and second quartile of the cost curve. So they're absolutely well positioned. So when we look at the portfolio today, I like our portfolio. I think it's a good mix. I do think we have a couple of assets that have been struggling over the last 6 months to generate cash, that being Illawarra and also Cerro Matoso in Colombia, which is a nickel operation. I think Illawarra, we've done lots of work around restructuring, and I'm comfortable about where the team's going to make that cash positive. I think Cerro Matoso is still a challenge for us, low nickel price, declining grade and a high cost base. So that's one business we're focusing a lot on how we restructure. In terms about how we think about growth, I sort of used a comment around two ends of the scale. Thermal coal, no interest because we have some assets today, and I don't think the fundamental industry attractiveness suits us. I do like copper assets, for example, and other base metal assets, but we're not going to go and buy something that basically is hugely expensive and blows up our balance sheet and doesn't create value. I think when we think about anything that we added to the portfolio, and we'll come back to one caveat in a sec, anything we added to the portfolio, we will only do it if we can add value. And how do we add value? Through our regional model synergies, or we have some specific skills around things like open stoping at Cannington. But when we talk about what's the most important thing, what do we spend 95% of our time on at the moment in South 32? It's optimising what we have and unlocking the resources, because we have a hell of a lot of resource that hasn't been a focus for the last almost decade to convert to reserve. So we've got to understand what our internal project pipeline looks like. We're going to continue to optimise our assets. And if we do those two things right, I've got no doubt we'll continue to grow the most important thing, which isn't the copper equivalent units or the tonnes or the widgets, it's actually the cash flow. And then we can have a look at external opportunities, but we don't feel like we have to do them. We think we have a good portfolio today and we can generate great returns for our shareholders. Yeah.
Hi Richard, I'm Luke Rebecki from Melbourne Uni, and I just wanted to ask about how did the employees feel transitioning from BHP to South 32, and what did you do to ensure to these employees that their job was safe?
Yep. Look, that's a loaded question on many fronts, but I'll maybe give you a little bit of background here. The majority of the operations that we inherited in South 32, if you worked at Worsley or you worked at Cannington or you worked, for example, in Energy Coal South Africa, you went with the demerger, you didn't have a choice. So you're sort of starting from that position for some of our employees. When you look at the people that work at the corporate office, when you think of the people that joined the regional offices, they absolutely had a choice. So the people who sort of joined the region and the corporate centre, building a culture has been very easy because it's new, it's energetic, it's shiny, it's an opportunity to do things. When we look at our operations, I think the majority of our people in those operations would be absolutely proud of where they came from. BHP Billiton has a great focus on safety, health, environment and community. The values have been ingrained in that organisation for a long time, so people took a lot of pride in that. But I would say, we're talking about the assets, if you like, that didn't really have their time in the sun. They didn't get a lot of visits from the board or the CEO or senior management. They certainly had no growth money invested in them, and they certainly weren't the primary focus of the analysts or the media. So if you take somewhere like Worsley today, good operation, great people, all of a sudden, they're a big part of South 32, and their people like the fact that we talk about their business in a positive way. They like the fact that they get to make the news. They like the fact that they can feel they make a difference. So I think the culture's running well, and I think people are really excited about the change. But I would sort of put the caveat, I mean, obviously we've done a lot of work over the first 12 months to restructure the business. So to your question around job security, we were very clear from day one that, look, we would have to change this business, we would have to run this business in a different way. So there's been that little bit of uncertainty while we made some of the changes, but certainly the operational changes are way behind us now, and the culture in each of the businesses continues to grow.
Joe Kukutsa, Managing Director of Amira International. Thanks, Graham, for that insight on South32. As a shareholder, it's always good to hear some of these things. My question really relates to what your thoughts are or what your plans are in respect to the role of research and development and innovation in growing South32.
Yep. Look, from our perspective, you know, we have assets or operations that are quite old in terms of some of their length of lives. You know, they haven't really had a lot of capital spent on them in the last decade plus. We are looking continuously ways that we can sort of run our business smarter, and I could roll off a series of examples about where we're using drones to inspect tailings dams and do stockpile surveys, laser imaging and 3D printing to help us in design of certain things. So we're doing lots of work in that space, but we sort of push both of those functions, if you like, to the regions. So we have an Australian region and an African region, and both of those, if you like, planning and resource functions have really close ties to a number of universities where they're working on innovation and new ideas. And they're also touching some of the spaces, if you like, around how technology can really unlock things. So we absolutely have a commitment to pursuing that. I wouldn't expect us necessarily to be the front runner, but I would expect us to be a fast follower. But I think technology has a second side of the dimension where we actually see what's it meaning for our end markets. That's something we also closely monitor in terms of, you know, what's happening with battery technology, what's happening with renewables, what does that mean for silver, for example, what does that mean for nickel, what does that mean for aluminium. So the world is constantly changing, and we're going to be prepared to change with it and move fast.
Thanks very much, Graham, and thanks for all those questions. I'd like to ask Lorraine Meldrum, CEO of Swan Global, to make her way to the stage for a vote of thanks.
Graham Kerr, in his role as CEO of South32, has delivered some remarkable results. The balance sheet is in good condition. Take the all-important net cash position, one of the best in the industry, despite what have been weak commodity prices. Another important item, the share price. It is well up on the recent past. So with Graham, we have seen performance and delivering of outcomes. Today has been no exception. He has delivered for all of us. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Graham